Hello again, friends. We meet once again. So today I'd like to talk about a concept that I think a lot of people get wrong. And so I'd like to talk about evil today, and to quote someone very near and dear to my heart, don't let evil take root. And so what does that really mean, not letting evil take root? So, in case you guys don't know, Yamaguchi was someone that assassinated the communist leader in Japan, basically because he didn't want that to be Japan's future. He said something along the lines of, "I have only one life to give," and it's so transient, basically, in typical Japanese poetry. I'm not going to go into too much depth quoting it and going through it. You can look it up if you want. He'll say it a lot better than I did, right? He was the one that sacrificed for keeping communism out of Japan and keeping socialism away from the Japanese. And so what was he trying to protect Japan from, right? And I think a lot of people either refuse to understand or don't really want to examine all of the elements that he was talking about. He was trying to keep out of glorious Nihon with running a blade through a communist once upon a time long ago in a world far away, one could say. And so why did he do it? So what was this guy advocating for? And one could argue that in the end it's pointless. Societies are going to degrade. Everything's going to fall into nothing eventually. But I figure, why don't we look at one small element of communism too? And let's talk about what evil actually looks like. Because I haven't really gone into too much depth explaining why communism bad. I've just said communism bad, and just assumed most people agreed with me. And they probably do, but for those of you that might not or want a primer on what evil is, I prepared a few quotes I think that are relevant from Engels here. So in case you don't know, he's one of the founders of communism, right? Contributed to the Communist Manifesto, wrote The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State, etc. So, I figure let's look at what evil actually did and why you would not let evil take root in where you live. So this is the first quote I've prepared from Engels, and it's about the family actually, and it's a deconstruction of the family. So let's pull it back really quick and let's go over what a deconstruction is and what critical theory is. So praxis is what communists want to move to. It's the ideal society. So anytime I say praxis, I'm referring to the utopian vision of what communism seeks to reproduce. A deconstruction is using critical theory to analyze something. So for instance, if I was trying to deconstruct a race, I would point out the racial differences. If I was trying to deconstruct the family, I would do what Engels is about to do in this quote. So in case you're wondering, this is basically a deconstruction of the word family as it applies. And so this is something Marxists like to do to try and sow, political discourse, is they will deconstruct something. So let's see what this type of evil looks like. Alright, so this is a quote from The Origin of Family, Private Property in the State from Friedrich Engels. The word familia did not originally signify the ideal of a modern Philistine, which is a compound of sedimentary and domestic discord. Among the Romans in the beginning, it did not even refer to the married couple and their children, but to slaves alone. Familius refers to a household slave, and familia signifies the totality of slaves belonging to one individual. The expression was invented by the Romans to describe a new social organism, the head of which had under him the wife, children, and a number of slaves. Under Roman paternal power, which power of life and death over them all. So here he's referring to what he believes is the origin of the patriarchy, right? He's saying that, basically because the word had this meaning in Rome, because we're deconstructing it, basically, that women are subservient to, a patriarch, or he's describing basically the idea of what a patriarch is. It's a number of slaves, women and children all being ruled under a man which has the power of life and death over them. So that would be his immediate deconstruction of the word family, or what a family is. And this is, what Engels would go on to describe as a family. And then that's not completely telling in and of itself how truly evil like these ideas are, where that's how you're deconstructing family. But he makes it more clear in another quote where the modern individual family is founded on the open or concealed slavery of the wife. Within the family, he is the burghers. I don't want to say that word to set off the YouTube filter. And his wife is represents the proletariat. So basically, he's framed it as, a Marxist deconstruction where you bring everything down to a power struggle, right? So if you're bringing something if you're using critical theory to analyze something, you're analyzing the latent power structures and trying to say that because, for instance, in Rome, a husband had the power of death over his wife, his children, and his slaves, and conflating that with modern day theory. And you're trying to imply that because the wife is subservient to the husband, like in the Judeo-Christian tradition, like in our modern day relationship, he says that is, a form of slavery and it's destructive. And then he's also, tying it into monogamy, where he basically says, like in his version of a deconstructed state, the ideal is, polyamory with women existing in some sort of tribal sense of freedom where they just, do as they please and children belong to the village and whatever hippy-dippy nonsense you would like to extract from this kind of, communist deconstruction. And so, in case you're not fully understanding why that's evil, trying to, collate the relationship between a husband and wife as economic slavery is just factually incorrect. It is so factually incorrect that I don't even know really where to begin with analyzing it. But if you're trying to say that a voluntary, you would also then have to say that any and all relationships between employers and employees are slavery and everything else. So that would be like a Marxist interpretation or a deconstruction of work. Of course, you would then have to point out that, an animal foraging for food for itself is slavery, as well as a human being. You would be allowed to deconstruct other things that are natural, and how they exist, and you could, deconstruct that, in fact, nurturing a child with breast milk is slavery as well, and you could go through and you could pick and choose all of these things. Of course, Marxists are just going to deconstruct the ones that, are applicable to their agreement. They're going to ignore, the struggle of Stoicism or the tyranny of oneself over oneself, and a whole host of other potential outcomes for that. And if you're going to try and claim and phrase every single relationship as a power struggle, and everyone as either a victimizer or a victim, you're going to have a very distorted worldview. And this is actually what communists believes. This is the mainline feminist talking point, right? Engels is where feminism originated from. And you have to wonder then, if you have someone here who's going to phrase every single loving relationship between a man and a woman as abject slavery, you also have to understand what evil looks like. And Engels and what he says in The Origin of Family and Private Property in the State is objectively evil. Communist rhetoric is objectively evil. And peace with individuals who believe these things and who spout these things is simply not an option. It never was an option. And so when you say destroy evil at its root, it literally means analyze and deconstruct communism at its root. Communism is defined as the power struggle in which you ignore everything else but your own hedonistic pleasure. Communism is not so much the abolition of private property. It's the abolition of responsibility to oneself. It's the abolition of the idea that you have responsibilities to anything. At the end of the day, this is an untenable worldview. It doesn't exist. It's impossible, and it's objectively evil. and the things that come out of believing something that's objectively evil like this is that you have people and morals that go out the wayside, and then you end up in a society in which has no morals, has no structure, and is lost in total chaos, and eventually collapses. And then out of that collapse comes, an authoritative great leader that rules over everyone, and then abuses his power because the power structures now favor him. And it's not like power structures are ever going to go away. You cannot speak words themselves. Like, let's deconstruct words here, since communists love to deconstruct things. A word is, you literally spell a word, and spell is very important because you're using a word, you make magic, basically, right? You're using your voice and your powers to try and express an idea. Literally, you are casting a spell whenever you say words in a logical way someone can understand, and they have power in and of themselves. And everyone has that power over everyone else, period. You cannot exist as a human in society without a power struggle. Some people are going to be more eloquent than others. Some people are going to relate ideas better than other people. Power and struggles exist, and based on your own intellect, they are inevitable. And trying to go against that, like, you rob people of their ability to speak if you try and take away their power. Just as an example, in a communist deconstruction, no, we're not allowed to deconstruct communism. That's not fair. You're attacking the praxis. But anyways, if you were to deconstruct communism, it would look something like that. And by that very argument that communism is against your ability to speak your mind by definition, because words are powerful and you're casting spells using your own word and lingo, should tell you everything you need to know without going too deep into how objectively evil a lot of the ideas of feminism and all this are. So the solution, of course, to this is to just simply not let these ideas take hold. If you let communist rhetoric take hold, they will remove your ability to speak. And so communists, if you adopt a principle of communism or socialism, or you've interacted with one of these people before, they are by default aggressive. Communism in and of itself has violated the non-aggression principle by existing, and your only response to that is self-defense, which is what Yaguchi did and what needs to happen to communism to remove it from the world. It's sad that we're at that state of affairs, but that is the world we live in. So that's all I have to say on that, though. Don't let evil take root, folks. Peace.